Hi, everybody. Welcome to the January 15th, 2016 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get a quick take on GOP State Representative Jon Keyser leaving his post to join the race to unseat U.S. Senator Michael Bennet. Patty Calhoun from Westward. This is a whole new face on the scene. He's 34 years old. He's a veteran of both of Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think he'll have what it takes to get the nomination out of a very crowded GOP field?
Well, that's going to be the tough thing. Right now, the clown car that brought in the Republican presidential candidates can come to Colorado and load up with all these Senate candidates. It's an incredible group. You know, Ryan Frazier's just announcing, Robert Blaha, I might have mispronounced that, Blaha. Keyser's the latest young, different profile, but it's going to just depend on how the party splinters. And Republican Party is definitely splintering these days.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. You know, Dick Wadham said that it's a big year in the party for anti-establishment. Is this the kind of voice that can do well in that kind of a year?
Conceivably, and that's an advantage of Colorado's caucus process, where all of the more than half dozen Republican candidates will have opportunities to meet up close with lots of well-informed, active Republicans. And out of that group, some will emerge. Everybody's going to have to be stepping up to a higher level in a bigger league, and some will, I think, likely be able to make that transition. Certainly, Keyser's issue is an important one, and that's a great thing to have a debate about. There will be a big, stark difference between him and Michael Bennet. It's an issue of the highest importance, to some degree, the survival and security of the nation, about which is the best approach to keep Iran from having nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly the kind of thing that should ultimately be settled by the people with a good election on an important issue.
Joey Bunch, political reporter from the Denver Post. Thank you very much for joining us. First time at the table. So over the legislature, this caused, I could see it probably causing a little bit of a kerfuffle, because we have State Senator Tim Neville, who has not stepped down from his post. And then we have Representative Keyser here making a point to point that out. What's been the reaction over there?
Well, everything's about elections. You know, January is more about November than it is the end of the session in May. You know, Keyser's stepping down at the end of the month. They'll have to name a replacement for him so that he can campaign full time, because he's kind of an unknown quantity. Got a great resume, handsome guy, friendly as they come, but Colorado voters don't really know him yet. Tim Neville, they know. So I don't know. We'll see. It's a gambit to step down and lose that bully pulpit of being in the legislature, but let's see how it plays out. I don't think we've seen the last of candidates getting into this race. There's still a chance that we could see a candidate get in, a Republican candidate. I've heard some names who could just clear the field. Oh. And if that happens, then Jon Keyser's made a mistake, because he's given up his political office.
That's a good point. You heard it here first. The clown car might grow. Broken here by Joey Bunch. Rounding out the panel, radio talk show host Miguel Baca-Barragan. Thank you very much for joining us. Finish it up for us.
Well, I'll tell you what. The important issues are going to be coming back to education. Senator Bennet was an extreme advocate for education, especially access to higher education. So when we see what he did from moving from Denver Public Schools on up to becoming a state senator, I think the person that follows that path is going to have that same interest when it comes to Colorado voters.
It's definitely a big issue around here. Well, let's get to it. President Obama delivered his final State of the Union address on Tuesday night, focusing more on accomplishments than a public policy agenda. Democratic leaders in Colorado, including Senator Michael Bennet, praised the president's work in reviving the economy. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Cory Gardner was hoping for a more detailed outline of how the president plans to handle foreign threats. Patty, State of the Union addresses are a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of fun, but this being this definitely being the last time we'll see President Obama in this role. What did you think?
Well, it was amazing how much he already sounded like a lame duck, and in fact, coverage almost got wiped out by yesterday's Republican presidential debate. He, to quote Jimmy Fallon, went from Obamacare to I don't care. He was talking about his legacy, and why not? Because we know unless he does it by executive order, he's not going to get anything through in the next year. So it's not surprised that he would want to really try to remind people of what he believes he's done, and he has made some accomplishments. Whether the economy did come back, how much he had to do with it is debatable too. But interestingly, he didn't get into his real legacy, which is Donald Trump's candidacy and the other Republicans we see. He did talk about the need for more civility. I mean, he's talking about things like that. But as we saw from Thursday night, where you had Trump calling Obama a petulant child, and if there's a lot, we see petulance, and most of it was on the Republican side. You had Cruz suddenly thinking he should be talking about the 10 sailors in Iran during the State of the Union speech. Everyone is attacking Obama and his legacy, and that's kind of the legacy he's leaving, is that, well, how many originally? 15 Republicans thought they could do a better job as president?
Yeah, shrinking by the day as we get closer to Iowa. David, I realize that this is a bully pulpit of sorts, but it's January. What kind of advantage does the bully pulpit of a State of the Union address offer President Obama if he wants to have any influence on the upcoming election?
Probably not much, because it is, I think, the most boring speech one could watch with all these Politburo-like scenes of people standing up to applaud. You know, the amount it gets to be more like baseball, of how much action you get versus how the long interims in between are make it hard to keep one's attention, regardless of who's giving the speech. And it's got even worse ever since Reagan had the idea of, like, oh, let's find American heroes I can point out in the audience, and that that slows it down even more. And so I enjoyed not watching it and just reading the speech and seeing some highlights. In terms of Senator Gardner's hope that you'd get more specifics on counterterrorism, Senator Gardner's a very optimistic guy, but he probably also hopes that the Rockies win the World Series, and I will say neither of his hopes are going to come true in 2016. But to focus on the good things that President Obama said, here's one thing that he was right, and I think he's a uniter on, is that education isn't about space or time. It's not a brick and mortar building. It's not about one person, one methodology, or one opinion. Innovative education transcends such confines to ensure that our students are prepared to be the future of our country. Now, how to do that is subject to debate, but he really laid out a accurate and very helpful goal.
Joey, we had a lot of conversation, heard a lot from President Obama about the reviving economy and what he says is his role in it. Here in Colorado, we definitely have a surging economy. Do you think those words have more credence in a place like Colorado and our purple voters?
Well, see, I thought John Hickenlooper was responsible for a rebounded economy here in Colorado. Let's be honest about the criticism from Republicans. There was nothing Obama could say that they were going to like to hear. And there was actually, if you look at the responses, the reaction from Washington, from our delegation there, they found agreement. Doug Lamborn said he was agreed with the president that we're polarized, but then he says that President Obama is our most polarizing president. Ken Buck agreed with him that our nation's biggest problems are national security, creating more jobs, and he even agrees that gun violence is a problem in our country, but he disagrees with the course, and then he doesn't go on to say what the Republican response to that is. What's the course that Republicans take? And I don't think we've heard that clearly from the presidential candidates yet. Look, you can mark out Barack Obama's name at this point and write Hillary Clinton, because that's what they want to do, is to tie this president to Hillary Clinton. So, I don't know. The rebounding economy, we've done very well here in Colorado, but we have very unique reasons why we've done very well here in Colorado. So I don't know how much credit you can give President Obama for what's going on in Denver.
Sure. Miguel, I think Joey brings up a good point about Hillary Clinton. Obama's base right now, his big fan base, can look back at 8 years and probably point out a lot of victories that they're in favor of. Where does that base go from here with the very likely candidate of Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side?
Great question. I actually might be one of the few that is very happy to have this president that we've had. For one, just starting with health care. I am a beneficiary of the Affordable Health Care Act. Prior to the Obamacare, it was like people like to call it, I didn't have health care for many years. So there's a lot of new voters that can relate to the same issues that I relate to. One thing that Hillary is a proponent of is, of course, children and the lack of a care for those that are in need. I hate to use the word at risk, but it's more receiving of services, so that they just don't have that opportunity to get a hand up in this world. And when we're dealing with children in poverty situations, we have, and that's one thing that Hillary Clinton started when first things she did when she got out of law school was went and worked for the Children's Defense Fund when it was getting started up. So when you see that she took the different road and going towards wanting to help impoverished children rather than make millions of dollars, when she graduated #1 in her class, where Bill Clinton was only, I believe, number 6 or 7. So when you see that her graduation and then her interest just coming out of law school, you can figure that that's going to carry forward into her presidential campaign.
Should be fun to watch. Well, the other big speech that happened throughout the week was at the legislature, because Colorado's 2016 legislative session began on Wednesday. The budget is expected to be a primary issue as the debate over TABOR and the hospital provider fee continues. In his State of the State address, Governor Jon Hickenlooper told legislators that if a compromise cannot be struck on the provider fee issue, then TABOR should be re-examined. David, when 9 News' Kyle Clark had a chance to interview Governor Hickenlooper after the speech, he asked him point blank, was that point he made about handle the fee or re-examine TABOR was a threat? Do you think it was a threat?
Oh, nice little Bill of Rights you got there. Too bad if something might happen to it. Of course we should re-examine this fee, and we should do it in accordance with our state constitution. A fee is when you pay for something and then you get something. For example, you go to the rec center, you pay a fee of $1 and they rent you a towel. When this hospital fee is nothing like that. This hospital fee is we take a lot of money from hospitals and we spend it on a social welfare program, Medicaid. Okay, that maybe that's a legitimate government thing to do, but that is not a fee in any legitimate sense of the word. When TABOR was on the ballot in 1988, it was narrowly defeated, and one of the strongest things the opponents said in their commercials was it covered fees. And they said, look, this is ridiculous. You're going to have to go to the voters then they used the towel example specifically. In 1990, the revised TABOR, which passed, took the fee thing out. And apparently that convinced enough additional voters that sure, we want to vote on taxes, but we don't need to vote on fees. Those voters who passed TABOR in 1990 were not thinking and had no reason to believe that somebody would try this absurd thing of having this enormous tax on hospitals to spend on social welfare and say that is a fee. It's not a fee, it's not an enterprise, it is just what social welfare government is. Tax some people, give the money to some other people. And so if you want to step outside the taxpayer's Bill of Rights to say how that somehow doesn't count as the normal operation of government, go to the voters and ask them, and they could decide to give you permission or not.
Joey, you're our guy on the Hill. How was the speech received, and how do you think the legislature is starting vibe-wise?
Well, it's starting very rocky. You know, normally we're talking about bipartisanship at this stage of the game, and then it turns ugly later. It started ugly way before the session this year. And part of the reason is the way the Democrats have framed this thing. They say, you know, if you don't let us do this on the hospital provider fee, well, there's going to be no money for roads or education. And that's kind of a false bargain. We have a $26.4 billion budget. You know, Brian Del Grosso told the Denver Chamber of Commerce last week that since he's been in the legislature, he has seen the general fund grow by 43%, and not a dime of that new revenue has gone to transportation. What Governor Hickenlooper and the Democrats have offered Republicans is a Faustian bargain. You know, sell your soul for a piece of gold, and your soul is your soul of TABOR. And Republicans say that the floodgate on government growth and spending is TABOR, and go find the money somewhere else. To say that that the reason that we don't have new money for roads and schools is because Republicans wouldn't give an inch on the hospital provider fee. Well, you know, why hasn't it happened in the past legislative sessions? Why haven't we found that money? You know, I don't know. I don't think the speech was funny. It was amusing. They threw rice on the governor who's getting married on Saturday. It was great in that response, but I think in the afterglow of today, one day later, I don't think there was room for compromise. The governor called for compromise, but he wanted compromise on his agenda, not, you know, I'll take some of your agenda, you take some of mine.
Miguel Wheeler talking about the hospital provider fee and a lot of other minutia from the Capitol Hill around this table. But I think when it comes to regular voters, they may not get into hospital provider fees or other kind of politics. They just want the highways to be paved and things to work. What do you think the average Colorado voter is going to take away from what's going on right now at the Capitol?
Well, first, one is to understand how the process works. Unfortunately, we do not provide that kind of education is as open as it used to be, or as many people take an interest into it. Worst thing we do is we complain about the pothole in front of our house, but we don't realize that there is a whole system that's designed in order to fill that pothole, along with adding lanes to our highways and reducing our congestion. And look at what Fast Tracks has been able to do. That took forever to get voted in until the demand was there. So really, it's going to be how well the message gets across to your average voter in the different ways that media is now, whether it's through internet, whether it's through television sources like this, that they can get the information on what would best represent their interest and how they're going to vote. So it's really going to come down to breaking down the argument and making it as simple as, how do I get that pothole fixed in front of my house?
Well, I know if we can advertise, you can find out how to get your pothole fixed on this program. Our ratings will skyrocket, yeah. So hopefully they'll put it right here. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Patty, the governor drew a clear line in the sand. Can he hold sway on this issue?
Well, sooner or later he can. It might not be in the legislature. It may be at the ballot box. We already have Building a Better Colorado kind of gearing up to put different ballot measures on, and they could certainly see that maybe this is the year, if they want to really make changes in the budget, that something has to go on the ballot about TABOR. I agree it might also be a time to put the hospital provider fee on if they can't get it out of the legislature. Part of the problem is there is no average Colorado voter except the person who's mad about the pothole that they just drove their car into. I think everyone could agree on that unless they rode their bicycle into the pothole. It's really tough to explain it, and you cannot count on the media to do that anymore. What media? I mean, Joey can talk about how many people are at the legislature now compared to what it was 20 years ago when there was blanket coverage. So it's going to be who can get the word out in a smart way, using social media, using other means, who's got campaigns, not just with money, because we've seen lots of expensive campaigns that haven't worked, like the education program of a couple years ago. But if you explain it in a good, smart way, which is almost impossible with the hospital provider fee, I could see there could be a lot of action at the ballot box in November.
It should be very interesting November. I can't wait. A coroner's office ruling that the November 2015 death of inmate Michael Marshall was a homicide is again putting the spotlight on Mayor Michael Hancock and the Denver Sheriff's Department. The city has declined to release the jail surveillance video, prompting community leaders, clergy, and members of Marshall's family to begin a hunger strike in protest. Joey, does the mayor at some point need to begin to worry more about the liabilities within his sheriff's department?
Well, it's fashionable to beat up on cops across the country, but Denver was way ahead of that trend. We've had problems in Denver for a decade. And, there's a line somewhere between, public accountability and public relations. And I don't think that Denver has found that line, but a lot of departments haven't. The families of Michael Marshall are saying, if you've got nothing to hide, release the video. But law enforcement also has an obligation to conduct a thorough, fair investigation. I don't know what the answer is here, but I know that that the distrust in law enforcement is a mean dog in itself. The less you trust law enforcement, the less we trust ourselves as a society. So this is just another example of putting Mayor Hancock and putting law enforcement in Denver to the test, and let's see how they do.
That's a good point. Miguel, the mayor did meet with the family and at least offered an apology, but reasserted what Joey talked about as saying we can't release the video based on an ongoing investigation. Does the mayor need to do more even with a pending investigation? Definitely.
From being a prior law enforcement officer, I can tell you that it is a difficult job, and it is a job that is on the spot kind of reaction. You can always do the what if game, and how to prepare for it. And that's about the most way to break it down and be as common as you can get. What if I back out of my garage today and I hit that pothole? You know what I mean? But you pre-plan and you try to figure it out. Now, as far as the mayor, breaking that down and helping the community to understand that there is an ongoing investigation, and making the community or helping the community to feel that he is being honest about that and is legitimate about coming to justice and what is going to so if as long as the mayor presents himself in an honest way and lets the community know that he's on it, okay? And something is going to come out of this investigation, whether it is a fault of certain officers and their actions, or whether it was due to a circumstance beyond their control or what was needed at the time. We don't know that. We haven't seen the video. So as far as the mayor's response to the community, it really has to be humble and honest and be truthful, you know, if we do not know. But I will make sure as the mayor that those that are responsible will be held accountable.
Patty, where's the tipping point from all of these cases stacking up to where it does some serious long-term damage to the City Hall? Have we passed it?
Well, we're past the tipping point, and had someone else run against Michael Hancock last election, we might have seen just how far past the tipping point we were. I mean, this case is so reminiscent of Marvin Booker, which is one of the reasons that the community is up in arms. But let's remember, you were talking about be truthful, you know, give a simple answer. How about give a quick answer? It has been more than 2 months since he died. So an investigation should be pretty far along by now. I don't see any problem with releasing that video. We see how well it worked in Chicago not to release a video. People will be suspicious. You can, 2 months out, you can give some context. You can finish your investigation, but they need to be more prompt.
David, without much fanfare, a new sheriff of Denver has been selected, not elected, as you've liked to point out. Can that change in leadership begin to change the tide?
If only there were some way that voters, instead of depending on the sheriff's office department to be run by a mayor who had no political opposition and this very indirect accountability, if only there were some way that the people of Denver could actually have direct control over and accountability for the sheriff's office. Maybe they should ask the city auditor, whom they elect, to investigate how things are done in other counties, and if there's some other procedure picking who the sheriff is and holding the sheriff accountable to the people themselves.
That seems wildly creative for government,
Yeah.
David. I'm not sure if there's any other options out there. Let's get to our very favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. And as always, Ms. Calhoun, please start us off.
Well, this is something we didn't get a chance to talk about, but Kansas, for holding these children hostage because their father wanted to come to Colorado and use medical marijuana for his PTSD he's suffering from as a vet. There's a lot to this story, but the very simple storyline is outrageous that he is being kept from his kids.
David.
The Department of Human Services in Colorado, which is now having to pay multi-millions of dollars to the U.S. government for not handling welfare money properly, by not even coming close to meeting the mandatory objectives for people who are on welfare being involved in like having a job or job training or something. So for example, among married two-person couples who are on welfare, the federal guidelines say you're supposed to have 80% of somebody in that family doing something towards a job, and in Colorado it's only 18%. Reggie Beecha, a retread from the Wisconsin political machine that was kicked out of office by the voters there, is doing a terrible job running that department.
Joey, your Disgrace of the Week.
Well, you know, I think it's more fundamental than government. You know, do you believe that marijuana is medicine, or do you believe that it's dope? You know, we as a nation have to have that discussion. And in Colorado, we're leading the way. You know, we've had medical marijuana for 14, 15 years now in Colorado, and I don't think we've reached that as a state yet. So how can you expect people in Alabama, Kansas, they haven't had that discussion yet. You know, it is a shame, this situation, but you know, is marijuana a drug or is it a medication? We haven't answered that question yet.
Miguel, your Disgrace of the Week.
You know, I'm tagging along here with Joey. I have to admit, I was an advocate, you know, in getting marijuana legalized here in Colorado, simply because I believe in reducing the prison numbers. However, and I agree with Joey, these other states need to start having that conversation, and they need to start introducing this so that it becomes more common or more accessible in their own states. We have the disgrace that I move towards is living downtown and seeing the amount amount of individuals that move to this city and are not interested in finding the jobs, but are more interested in your leftovers when you leave, Willie G's. So, and it is becoming a frustration because I know that we have a homeless population that is suffering from mental health. And I really feel terrible for those individuals because they are now moved into the outskirts of the city and they can no longer access those services.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's our most difficult part of the show. Say something nice about somebody. Patty?
Not difficult. I have two. Both events next week. Obviously, the MLK Parade. Colorado was one of the very first places to legalize the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. The parade is great. And also a follow-up on something we talked about last week. There will be a public memorial for Penny Parker at Exto on Friday, January 22nd. So there'll be details on our Facebook page.
Good. I know there's going to be a lot of people wanting to attend that. It's great. David?
The Colorado Department of Local Affairs, which made a large grant so that the city of Palisade can build a indoor-outdoor shooting, archery, target range, and that's a great way to promote public safety because people have guns. The more opportunities they have to practice responsibility and accuracy in training, the better.
Joey?
Representative Joe Salazar from Thornton. He's going to introduce a bill this session that probably won't pass to rename Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day. Last year, he ran a bill about offensive mascots. He lost that. But what Representative Salazar does is he moves the conversation down the road. And a lot of people, and I've watched Joe do this on a lot of issues. He'll take on the unpopular issues, the ones that people are going to beat up on him. It makes it very difficult for him at election time, but what we see too little of in government these days is people with courage. Joe Salazar, I give him a compliment.
And Miguel, go ahead and wrap it up for us.
Great. Joey, thank you for acknowledging Representative Salazar, and I want to back that up with our voters in Colorado. Just went to the National Stock Show. Give them a big thumbs up because the extravaganza last Sunday was incredible. The incredible show. I encourage all of your listeners to go to the stock show and support it, and the voters for passing the new Coliseum that they're going to renew the whole area there and bring it up to date. And so congratulations to the voters on moving forward on this over 110-year tradition.
That's all the time we had tonight. Thanks for tuning in. As always, remember to check out our CIO podcast on iTunes and our web-exclusive segments on our Twitter feed. Also, be sure to check out our special night of music on Wednesday, this upcoming Wednesday, including a great Billy Joel concert from, I think it's the 80s or 90s from Russia. It's fantastic. That's on at 8 p.m. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Hello, I'm Steven, and I'll be directing Colorado Inside Out today. I'm not a director, but I play one on TV. The main thing I'll be doing is watching these monitors up here and trying to determine when to go to the talent who will be talking. I'll be working mostly with Tyler, which is our technical director, so he's the one who's pushing all the buttons. He's a big button pusher.
Hello, my name is Tyler. I'm the technical director here. It's called a switcher. I basically listen to the director and take the camera cuts as the director calls it.
Ready, camera 2, take.
So each button here corresponds with a camera out in the studio. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4. For CIO, we use 4 cameras. This bottom row is for preview, so before taking a cut, we pull it up in preview. The preview monitor is to the left there. And as soon as we want to take it into program, which is what's actually going to tape what's being recorded, the director will say, all right, take camera 1. I also wait for the director's cue to bring in IDs, sort of the lower third, tells who the guest is. Also loading clips, roll-ins, which includes the open, and it all changes show to show, so, which is fun. So I basically I take orders from the director, as we all do, and we really enjoy it.
Hello? Is this working? Everyone else is doing their own job and contributing, and the director just kind of is the focal point.
Mic and cue in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fade mic cue.
The director's main job is just to kind of funnel all that and bring it all together.
Roll credits. X-Bang down. Set black and dissolve. Audio out.
Welcome to the January 15, 2016 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. I'm Dominic Dezzutti, your host. Let's get a quick take on a child protection case in Kansas renewing the interstate conflicts over marijuana laws this week. Raymond Schwab, a Gulf War veteran, decided to move his family from Kansas to Colorado to pursue cannabis treatment for his PTSD. However, Kansas Child Protection Services have taken his kids from his custody and say they will only return them if he passes state drug tests in Kansas. Patty Calhoun from Westward, you are by far our expert when it comes to marijuana laws, how they affect the entire country.
And the world.
And the world, really, and the world. I was remiss in saying that. When you read the story, what was your reaction?
Well, it's outrageous because also, as you read the story, you see there's probably a little dysfunction in that family. There's a lot of confusion. Did the mother-in-law take the kids? But what is not confusing is the results of medical marijuana on vets with PTSD. Sue Sisley, a doctor who's been leading the research in Arizona, has found remarkable effects that marijuana has had on veterans with PTSD. Colorado paid $2 million for her to continue that study because we can all debate the benefits of marijuana a lot, but I think there are certain places it's really helping, and with PTSD that's true. So this man should be able to have the medication that helps him. He's a vet, and Kansas should not be taking his kids because of it.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. At this stage of the game, we have, it's an awful case. It has a lot of different arms and legs here, but when you have an interstate thing like this between Kansas and Colorado, what's the best way to get this resolved? Is it federal lawmakers? Because it's not going to be in Congress. What do you think?
No, I think, first of all, I agree with everything Patty said about that case, and I wish Kansas were taking a different policy and particularly had a kinder attitude towards vets in Kansas who need medicine. But the same principle of state sovereignty and states' rights, which gave Colorado the choice itself to legalize marijuana, protects just as much Kansas's rights to run family law, including custody issues, the way it wants. And that diversity is overall helpful to the country, where we don't want to have one size fits all imposed on a very large and diverse country just because somebody gets a majority in Congress. And Congress is part of the cause of this problem because, after all, even though it's legal in Colorado to grow and consume your own in Colorado, something that has nothing to do with interstate commerce, still it's illegal federally to do that in Colorado, supposedly because your private non-commercial activity, which may never extend beyond the boundaries of your own house, is part of Congress's power to regulate commerce among the several states.
Joey Bunch, political reporter over at the Denver Post, thanks for joining us. Well, this is certainly between two states. The whole idea of marijuana regulation is usually a pretty hot topic at the legislature. Do you sense any new regulations or action on it this year?
Well, we still haven't solved the edibles issue yet. You know, how do we make sure that a marijuana-fused gummy bear doesn't look like a regular gummy bear? You know, marijuana is becoming so ubiquitous, it's easy to blame it for all of society's ills. You know, alcohol has been down this road. You know, rock and roll music has been down this road. I think now it's marijuana's turn. And yeah, I just don't know enough about that case. As Patty said, I think there may be more than meets the eye there. And marijuana is an easy thing to pick on, especially in a conservative state like Kansas that's probably never going to legalize it. So I don't know. I don't know that there's a simple answer. You know, we all look for simple answers, but on this issue, I don't think there is one.
Radio talk show host Miguel Baca-Barragan joins us. Thank you for being here. When you see this story, what's your reaction?
Well, like Petty was saying, what's going on in that family? First of all, one, when someone as a parent cannot make the decision for their own health and for the welfare of their children, then maybe the state should get involved. But when you already have a diagnosed, a situation resulting from war, as a result of being a veteran and serving for your country, I don't think you should have to fight your country to have your own rights as a parent. And on top of that, especially if you're not introducing any kind of harm to your children, if you're just needing the medicine and you can't get it in the state that you're in, what's wrong with moving to a state that you can access that for your own health? And as long as, again, it's not harming the children, a mother-in-law's opinion, really, when are we going to get to the actual facts? And that's where we maybe need some more about the story itself.
You would think untreated PTSD would be a bigger threat to the entire community.
I would rather address that issue than this.
That's all the time we have for Colorado Inside Postgame this week. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dizzuti. Thanks very much for watching.